Pó de Terra, Agropoesia de Libertação, de Cabral.
People are the mountains. Mining historical strata to almost half a century ago, we find Amilcar Cabral at the University of London on October 27th in 1971. Describing the state of the armed struggle he had led since 1963 in the country that was then known as Portuguese Guinea. After 8 years of anti-colonial war, 2/3 of the small West African country had been freed from Portuguese occupation. Within these liberated zones that spread across areas of tropical forest, the PAIGC, the African Party for the Independence of Guinea and Cape Verde, had established schools, hospitals, courts, and people's communal shops. During these years, Cabral moved between the party headquarters in Conakry, then in neighboring Guinea, the jungle of the guerrilla within Guinea-Bissau, and the international geopolitical realm where he was advocating for and attempting to develop a new society. At the lecture in London in 1971, he described the conditions of the armed struggle in Guinea-Bissau.
A nós nos está num parte plano da África. Aquele manual de guerra de guerrilha, de uma maneira geral, este afirma que um país tem que ter uma determinada dimensão para criar aquele que nos chama de base. E para além daquela, que montanha é que é o melhor lugar para fazer guerra de guerrilha. Claro que a nós nunca tem essa condição na Guiné, mas que lá que é impedindo de cunça nos luta de libertação. Quanto a que as montanhas, a nós não decide que no povo tem que tomar esse lugar. Por modo, então, era impossível desenvolver uma luta de outra maneira. Então, no povo, é esse que é nos montanha. So our people are our mountains.
Cabral's metonymy, mountains equal people, refers in part to the morphological flatness characterizing the surface of this specific West African soil, as well as to the lack of a hierarchical structure in the anti-colonial movement. However, it also reveals the intimate relation that Cabral maintained with the material matter of mountains, composed of soil and bedrock. While for Che Guevara's guerrilla in Cuba, the mountains were a resource that secured locations where they could establish their bases and consolidate their power. Cabral flattens this strategy to adapt it to the specific geopolitical circumstances.
In Guinea-Bissau, the PAIGC had succeeded in uniting the people within a horizontal, organized anti-colonial movement that prioritized education and humility as weapons of the militant struggle, where peasant work and intellectual labor were of equal value instead of being submitted to hierarchical valorization. The mountains were the people made potent the multitude. Furthermore, and less metaphorical, this pattern, looking at the masses of militant and seeing the potential strategic force of mountains, reflects his understanding of the world, ecosophical term meaning holistic understanding of ecology. This resonates with the less known and often neglected dimension of Cabral, practice as an agronomist, and how his research on soil and erosion informed his political formation.
In Cabral's thought, the geological is not separated from human history. The soil is not an inert and static ground subjected to human agency, but rather has a dynamic relation to human social structures, evident in its different responses to forms of colonial extractivism. An example of this interrelation was the devastating drought at Cape Verde in 1941, which took the life of over 20,000 people and was witnessed by Cabral at the age of 17. According to his daughter, Eva Cabral, this experience influenced his decision to become an agronomist.
No Pod afirma, sem medo de contradizer companheiro, que defende terra é a forma mais eficiente de defender o mundo de pecador. Cabral's understanding of soil and erosion are not dissociable from his project of liberation struggle. His reports on colonial land exploitation and the trade economy, along with the research on soil and erosion, reveal his double agency as a state soil scientist and as a sower of the African liberation. Na 1960, a minha era o único agrônomo de meu país. E que lá era um privilégio. Mas agora, não tenho 12 agrônomos no país. Tudo isso foi formado durante a luta.
Cabral understood agency and agronomy not merely as a discipline combining geology, soil science, agriculture, biology, and economics, but as a means to gain materialist knowledge about people's lived conditions under colonialism.
The scientific data Cabral gathered during his work as an agronomist first became instrumental in the theoretical and political argument denouncing the injustice perpetrated on land inscribed by the colonial rule, and would later inform his military strategy. Care for the soil was crucial for Cabral, as part of the work of reclamation of soil and more necessary in the project of national reconstruction in the post-colony. The operation of reading the people as mountains in the context of colonial extraction, oppression, and exploitation evidences a visionary understanding of the capitalocenic condition of the surface of the earth.
Lithos atmos conflict. The soil is a natural, independent, and historical body. Cabral's experience as a student of agronomy in the late 1940s and his research in southern Portugal gave him an indication of the importance of understanding the role of soil and integrating it in a conception of the world. Cabral stressed the importance of not defining soil through its static morphological aspect, but through its variables and its relational and dynamic potential.
Aquele ser que te dá origem à terra é rocha. Com a ação de agente natural, a terra te fragmenta e te desfaz. E te transforma naquele que não te chama de pedologia, material originário, que é materialização de rocha. It refers to this as a relative negation of the rock, where natural agents destroy his structures and negate it, creating original matter. The original matter from the destruction of the rock before it became soil. Subsequently, a second negation of the materialization process corresponds to the development of the body soil, which he identifies as independent, natural, and historical. Aquele equilíbrio é fazer com base na contradição, que te gera sucessiva transformação, oxidação, redução, carbonatação, dissolução, hidrolose, variação de volume, translocação de composto, atividade de microorganismo.
Cabral elaborates on the coeval forces of lithos, rock, and atmos, klima. A zone of destruction and transformation between independent elements and from which life is possible. From this, soil can be understood as the crust of meteorization. The definition of meteorization of the rock as a negation of one in order to give rise to another informs a dialectical and materialistic search to redefine soil as a zone of conflict. Cabral carefully notes the utility of embracing conflict and contradiction, negation and destruction.
Aquele conflito entre litos e átomos até existe para modo aquele antagonismo entre clima e rocha. Se não admitia a finalidade na fenómeno natural, não te podia afirmar que aquela oposição te obriga a rocha na transformação, para poder subsistir. Nem rocha te desaparece para sempre, nem é para aquela ação de fator climático. Aquele que não te verifica essa integração de uma nova forma de existir na negação. This observation in tension in natural phenomena can be read as an urge to allow for a kind of rock agency, the rock, soil, as a carrier of a prose, a narrative, the substrate where everything is inscribed.
Geophysical force, neither subject nor object. A force is the capacity to move things. It is pure, non-ontological agency.
Cabral reads the soil, the historical body, listening to its processes, as later parsing a parallel with what was occurring within the Guinean people, the mountains. The metonymy is that people are part of the soil is part of the people. Cabral, stating that the people are the mountains, means that the people themselves are the terrain of the struggle, in contrast to the geological mountains as an instrument offering refuge to militants. He summarized the definition of soil with an equation where soil is a sum of all the properties and materialization in the given period of time. S. Propriedade de terra. C. Clima. O. Organismo. R. Topografia. P. Material originário. T. Tempo. S. Terra. V. Pádia. H. Picador. DT. Desenvolvimento no tempo. Colonial erosion. Planting is the root of ownership and the waging of war. After defining soil as a place of conflict, Cabral continued with concepts of erosion. Operating under the constraints of a dictatorial Portugal, his activity as an agronomist was subversive. He advanced the liberation struggle from the inside, using colonial resource to inform and strengthen the liberation movement.
Cabral defines erosion, the displacement of soil, from the surface of the earth by natural agents such as water and wind, as a natural phenomena that is realized slowly and gradually within the heart of balance: soil, life, climate. This natural balance can be threatened by the erosion caused by human intervention. Cabral's work on the documenting of the loss of balance produced by colonial intervention should be read in the context of an oppressive system utilizing censorship to enforce its power. The critical situation of Portuguese agriculture led him to study Alentejo's ecosphere, how the surface of the earth acts on its living beings, with a specific focus on the main cause of its crisis, soil erosion. He examined the colonial mainland and interpreted the condition of its soil depletion as the result of Portugal's exploitation of land elsewhere.
Panorama geral alentejano reflete clara influência do processo histórico de província, desde viagem marítimo e descoberta que resulta na criação de império, que leva a deixa para lado a agricultura nacional. Para modo de riqueza de Índia era mais melhor que incerteza de cultiva si próprio chão. E. Erosão. F. Fator. F. Topografia. V. Pádia. S. Terra. H. Picador.
soil is the inscribed body, and erosion the scar left by historical violence.
Sistema cultural característico de África Negra é chamado de itinerante. Parte de floresta ou de savana é escolhido para submito e para cultiva. Depois, esta consa com monda e curramonda. E depois esta queima. Chão é cultivado durante um tempo e depois está deixado. Então, floresta com savana está tornando a ocupar aquele chão. Aquele sistema itinerante exige uma grande instabilidade de aglomerado de gentes. Homem que finca na chão, mas que ele finca na chão parece que é aquela condição essencial para qualquer povo.
Cabral explained how the itinerant agricultural system is an endemic solution to the problem imposed by the Black African environment and became acute in his criticism of colonial agricultural measures.
Para resumir, o colonialismo está introduzindo na África um novo sistema de produção que não pode traduzir na economia de venda. E também na mesma um sistema itinerante de cultivo de chão. Naquele sistema itinerante, aplica ou tenta aplicar sempre essa atenção na condição mesológica e ecológica que é a prática agrícola da Europa. Para modo a ele tem firme nesse pensamento de que essa prática é melhor e superior do que o outro africano.
Cabral turned the mirror back to Europe, suggesting a solution partially as a consequence of agricultural crisis. It was, after all, European powers that had accelerated their colonial projects in a process that consolidated with the scramble for Africa during the Berlin Conference between 1884 and 1885.
Que é determinante econômico que na Europa tem sido razão para a era de descobrimento, faz que o europeu finca pé na África, de aquele comércio simples de mercadoria, onde no meio não está encontra o homem negro, o europeu passa a explorar a terra, mas que tem jeito, cima ao homem africano, que ele fim de produzir, que é necessário para ser sustento. O europeu cultiva ou faz o homem negro para cultivar produto que é para mandar para fora. E de que essa contradição criada que resulta de que lá, todo dia, que acentua aquela devastação de chão africano. Com vida fora de balanço, não tenta satisfazer que só que é novo necessidade criado, mas também tudo que é exigência de nova condição social, aquele africano, pouco a pouco desenraiza, imigra ou forçado a imigra. A ele, nem que tem mais tempo para assimilar aquela sabedoria que ele mesmo cria, com base naquele conhecimento que aprende de sua experiência acumulada durante séculos. Que desequilíbrio na organização de chão negro africano estimula aquele surgimento de doença que enfraquece o organismo do pecador.
Later, in 1969, already in the midst of the War of Independence, in a workshop with the PAIGC Political Bureau, Cabral discussed different modes of resistance: political, economic, cultural, and military. One argument he made for economic resistance was the awareness of the bureaucratic nullity of the value of Black African labor through the manipulation of taxes, prices, and wages.
A nós não analisa a cultivação de mancara e não chega à conclusão de que aquele trabalho é trabalho forçado. This calculation demonstrates the perpetuation of the exploitative system of labor that continued in Guinea, even after slavery was officially abolished. In drawing attention to this relation, he anticipated today forced migration of African subjects as a result of the historical devastation of the soil.
Semantics for soil reclamation. Cabral's first job in Portuguese Guinea was directing the state farm of Posebe, Granja de Posebe, in 1952, which he quickly transformed into an experimental farm. His program at Posebe?
The first one was to transform the farm from a mere unit of vegetable production destined to the colonial political and administrative authorities of the Praça city and a place for picnics and recreation walks into a center of agricultural research, a tool to improve and to modernize the production of the farmers. The second was to tear down internal walls within which the agricultural service were confined, to approximate them to the farmers, who should be the main beneficiaries. The third was that of the interaction of Guinean farmers with those in the neighboring countries of the sub-region.
The experimental farm project was intended to change the farming practices with the aim of emancipating people and repairing the land. The intrinsic operations of the Agricultural Research Institute, rooted in the motto, experimentation, dissemination, already show traces of what later became Cabral's theory of culture.
Cabral developed his revolutionary theory following his emergence from this early period of double agency, when under the alias of Abel Jassy, he led the nascent anti-colonial movement while still working as an agronomist for the Portuguese regime. With the launch of the armed struggle, he entered the world stage as a leader of the PAIGC, as a theorist of the anti-colonial resistance. É que é possível de criar uma harmonia entre a economia com a dominação política do povo. Qualquer que também se torna seu grau de desenvolvimento social com a preservação de sua identidade cultural.
Guinea's morphology is a mountainous alluvium, with 70% of its soil under sea level. These arms of the sea have no words in the colonial lexicon. The awareness of this lack signals something amiss in the colonial epistemology. You only see what you already know. The inadequacy of the Portuguese lexicon is proof of the illegitimacy of their occupation. This tidal condition also suggests the vulnerability of a permeable land inscribed with centuries of invasion.
Na Guiné, terra é cortado para braço de mar, que nós no tachumal de rio, mas na verdade a esse é rio, para modo tino chiga na terra seco, não tem somente água salgado. Another example is a tactical of a simultaneously semantic concept of a centrifugal movement. A nós, não adota uma estratégia que não pode chamar de centrífuga, que está parte de centro para fora do nosso país. E esse facto ali é provoca surpresa na português, que junta-se as tropas na fronteira de Guiné com Senegal, na ideia que nós estava a planear invadir nossa terra vindo do lado de fora.
People are the mountains.
Povo, esse que é montanha.
People as mountains is a counter-extractivist mindset, an animistic activation of the soil, a convocation of various knowledges, and a negation of coloniality. A soil reclamation.
Recuperação de chão.